for Thursday, June 21st, the regular meeting. I'll call the meeting to order, and we would like to all recite the Pledge of Allegiance together, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item for the agenda this evening is the introduction of board members. Sean Winston, David Dow, Niall Shore, I'm Paul Bovair, Nicole Fecto, and Mike LaRue. We have our current chairman is not with us tonight, that's Dave Andreessen. So I think we're going to be having Mike fill in for the entire meeting for that. Okay. The next item is the approval of the minutes. These are for the June 7th meeting.
I'll pass up on one mistake. I put you abstain rather than oppose, so.
That's right, in two places.
Yes.
There's two mistakes.
Yes, I missed the line, yeah.
Any other changes that we need to consider?
A lot of minutes. Talked about a lot of stuff.
If there are no other changes, I'll entertain a motion that we approve.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
And we have a motion and a second to approve the June 7th minutes. Have a show of hands. Those in favor? Those opposed? None. Minutes are approved.
Are you going to do public comments?
The next item on the agenda is the public comment period. And I guess I had those out of order, but it should not make a difference. So if there's anyone that has things they would like to comment on that are under planning board purview, please step to the podium and tell us what they are. If it's things that are going to be covered later on during this meeting, it's best that you hold off until we bring those items up and not make them part of the public comment period. So, anyone up for a public comment?
So, I invited Dave Springer. He has it's considered agriculture at 398 School Street. And, we kind of were in between. We've been in between code enforcement officers with Joe and Mark, and we had a building that was permitted as a garage in February. And there's a bit of a disagreement, and it's been kind of an ongoing issue. So I invited Dave to come up to talk with Lee J, talk with the board to really clarify what his next steps are. So Dave.
Yeah, and I'm having Tammy talk for me. She
Sure.
has everything laid out with a platform with everything that would happen.
Yeah. I'm Dave's attorney. I'm Tammy Snow, Dave's attorney. So what's happened here, I put together two timelines to show what's happened here. And I have copies for each of you.
Thanks. Phone and some cases. Anybody's here?
Mine.
Thank
There you go.
Thank you.
And then I also have this letter. I only have one copy of it, but you can pass it down and see the letter. So if you look at the timeline that has the red arrow on it. This shows the sequence of progress of what Dave has been doing with this property. So if you look, on December 16th, there was a letter from the town, from the code enforcement officer. I believe it was the previous code enforcement officer, who, and that's the letter that I'm passing by, that said that the town was permitting what was called a medical marijuana operation on this parcel. And so in reliance on that letter, then Dave started building buildings on this parcel. So he not only built buildings, but he built a road. He completely fenced the area. He put in a security gate so that no one could come in without a code, because his plan, as everyone knew, was to build these medical marijuana facilities for cultivation, for processing, for those kinds of things, for medical marijuana. He was upfront about that that's what he was doing. So he put a lot of money into this, and if you see then, in the winter of 2017, he started the preparation work on the first building, and then in the spring, then he started on the second building. Right after that, he finished the first building. He started then on the third building, finished the second building, started the fourth building, which is the building at issue, and then finished the third building. So if you look at this timeline, he started this fourth building in the fall. I believe it was October, right, Dave? In October, the town changed the ordinance limiting medical marijuana facilities to a zone that is not this zone, to an RCI zone, and required a conditional permit. So, but Dave had already started this work before that ordinance was changed. So my position is that he should be grandfathered in with that. He then, if you look at this other timeline, it's a little more detail on his interactions with the town. So again, December 16th, he received this letter. He relied on this letter to start this work. January through November of next year, as we just saw, he methodically went through building these buildings. In October, he started the excavation, the grading for the fourth building as part of this medical marijuana operation on the same parcel that he had gotten permission for. November 7th, the town enacted the ordinance. And then the town gave him, in November 17, the town gave him an occupancy permit for the third building. So now he has the three buildings, the occupancy permits. Then he goes ahead because he believes that it's all part of this medical marijuana operation. In December, he gets the septic design done. He gets the perk test done for the fourth building, which he had to do before he could get a building permit. In January, he went to the town hall to get the building permit, and that's the first that he learned of the ordinance change, that this ordinance had changed. And again, remember, this ordinance changed after he had started work on this fourth building. So at that time, he learned that the ordinance has changed, and he was told that he couldn't get an occupancy permit. So then in February, he was told that he could get an occupancy permit. This was from, I believe, the previous code officer. He was told that he could get an occupancy permit if it was a processing facility. Now, what's interesting about that is the ordinance says that processing facilities can't be in this zone now under the new ordinance. So that was a little bit odd. And then in April, he talked with the new code officer and the town engineer, who told him that any kind of medical marijuana business activity in the fourth building would be against code, and that he would need a change of use permit from the planning board. So here we are.
I've got a couple of questions. This is relatively new to me, and I'm not sure about the other members on the board. But I see 4 buildings involved in this,
Correct.
some of which were, I'm not sure the stages that we're at, like in the fall of 2017. I see one building saying finished fall of 2017, the third building. My question would be, with a letter dated December of 2016, that it would give, for whatever operation, medical marijuana being one of them, I'm surprised that a conditional use would not be, for that many buildings, would not be something that would be covered under the land use ordinance.
Agriculture is a permitted use.
Permitted use in the R.
Are these buildings agriculture?
Wow.
So if you,
Yeah,
Yes.
so.
Yes, the use, the agricultural use. is
Use.
Permitted use in the R3
how about the
zone.
building of the buildings?
Well,
And the square
that's-
footage on the ground
That's-
and
that's
all
the
of,
que-
I can
that's
think
the
about
great
1,000
question.
things.
I
Yeah.
have not seen the timeline. It
Yeah.
has not been provided to me.
Oh.
What I'd like to know is what the sequence of building permits were that were issued. Thank you. Because if a building permit had been issued for buildings 1, 2, and 3, and those were being built under the auspices of, at the time, the use was considered an agricultural use. Once the new zoning ordinance, once the new use came in, whatever that date was, I need to put this into this timeline, is that if it were a medical marijuana grow facility or production facility, what have you, based on our use categories, which are not permitted in the R3 zone, then a building permit could be issued for that building after that date, but it could not be issued for that particular use in that zone. So if he wanted to put up a building for some other purpose other than medical marijuana production, medical marijuana, grow facility or anything that's listed in here, that's fine. But the use, it's not the building that drives it, it's the use going into the building that drives it. And so I would need to see, because James did make me aware that this would be coming tonight, but I hadn't had a chance with all the other stuff we were doing today to look at when was that permit issued for that building, when was the zoning put in place?
The zoning was put in place November,
16th.
November 16th.
and then the building in question was permitted as a garage February 2018.
I'm sorry, November 7th. November 7th, yeah.
So the zoning was well in place at that time, which did not permit that use to occur. It could be built as a garage, because the garage would be a permitted use in that zone. But it cannot be built as a garage to house a medical marijuana production facility or whatever the use he wants to
Yeah,
put in
it-
there.
it-
So it's really use-driven. It's not a matter of whether the building permit was issued in a timely manner or whether the building permit was issued for a particular structure. It's what's the use going in there. And clearly the medical marijuana ordinance was passed long before the permit was issued for that structure.
What is our definition of agriculture? Does it include marijuana growing?
No,
No, we've gone
No,
back and
because we
forth
have
over
separate
this.
definitions for that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is a comment period. This is becoming a heck of a lot more than a
Yeah.
comment
It
period.
is.
yeah, so,
And I'm kind of surprised that, this is something that I don't think we as a planning board really want to get into
Well,
until we know more about it.
Yeah.
Right, and clearly, the path that I suggested, in hearing the bits and pieces that James had a chance to brief me on, was that clearly what needs to happen is the code officer, whoever that may be at this time, needs to basically deny the permit for a medical marijuana operation in there. And then they would need to go to the Board of Appeals, and this issue should be brought before the Board of Appeals as an administrative appeal disagreeing with the position that the code officer has taken.
I
And
agree.
then we would need to prepare a brief on behalf and say this is why the permit was
So
denied.
this is not something we should be covering during a comment period.
Right.
If at all. I mean,
If
it
at
sounds like we don't have jurisdiction over
It
this.
really
any-
belongs
We
with the
really
zoning board of
It's a
appeals
co-
at
it's a
this
code
point.
enforcement, right,
Yes.
yeah.
And the Board of Appeals, not
Correct.
us.
Right.
That's what I would think.
It is too bad
yeah,
that the
so-
original
so
project
just-
didn't come in
just a
front of
quick-
us, though.
The reason why.
It is, especially
And we
with 4
could've-
buildings.
Well, because we could have put some the regulations on it that we just put on the other project
Yeah.
that we just had.
Yeah, on Portland Street.
Yeah.
I just wanted, this has been an ongoing issue and where it's headed. I just wanted everybody to be on the same page because this has been it's been extended for a while now.
Yeah, well, the issue that started this was you couldn't do the medical marijuana, but you could do processing is what I was instructed. And I was clearly directed, that's why Joey Russo was supposed to be here to make sure everybody was aware. He gave me the information that I could proceed with this, doing processing.
Did he know the scale of which you were getting into?
Well,
It was more than a
that's why I
garage, it was,
asked Joey, you're right. I said, Joey, now, do I have any problems doing this? I could do processing, I can't do agricultural, cultivation. And that's what ended up, it all fell apart. I mean, Joey was stunned that I couldn't do processing after he told me I could.
all right, so.
Well, yeah, and,
At this point, I think,
Yeah.
the comment period on this topic probably should be stopped,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, the
And
next step is Board of
The
Appeals.
Appeals Board.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks.
Any other small comments? from The public? Les?
I'll keep it brief, I promise. Hi, I'm Les Bardwell. I own some property here in Berwick. We're gonna be discussing one of my properties in a few minutes, but while I was on the site today, I noticed that one of my neighbors has pigs, and I didn't know if that was an allowed use in the R1 zone, and if it is there a clear difference between animal husbandry and pets?
Oh, we're very familiar with, we're very familiar with this problem here at the Berwick Planning Board, if you read through the minutes from our last meeting. I brought that up with the code enforcement officer, who is no longer our code enforcement officer as of this afternoon, from what I understand, so I will bring it back up with Joe when he steps back in.
There is a distinction between the production of farm animals and pets.
But it's not defined in our, I mean, there's a distinction in our brains, but not defined in our
And-
land use.
And we felt, I think, at the last meeting, I can be corrected if other people feel different on the board, but I think what you're looking at is a nuisance, and that could be another thing that is really outside the planning board's purview. We don't deal with nuisances. However, we do have health standards in a town, and there's an unhealthy environment there that can be covered, through the town office. And if there's a nuisance, it could be a civil matter. That's probably the way to go, but
Well, you might want to file a complaint with the code enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Who should
So
go
w-
out there and determine whether,
Yeah.
Because it's close to
Property is
wetlands
being
too. I mean, it's within 100
Yeah.
feet of
Yeah.
wetlands. There's
Yeah,
manure.
there's a lot of
There's
considerations
a foot
on that.
I mean,
deep
I
of
think the
manure
the
within 100 foot of
CEO is
wetlands.
the first step
Yeah.
to decide.
Because the other question I would ask is, as far as the smell goes, I've been to plenty of meetings here where you guys talk about marijuana cultivation, and you talk about, making sure that they have efficient odor control so as to not disturb other people's property, other people's enjoyment of their property. Is there a similar such ordinance in place for odor control on animals?
Not livestock, no.
I don't think we have odor control, because it's never been an issue. We do have noise, for example, that's bedded down in a land use ordinance. But I do not think, we have covered no odor. It has not come into
Specifically in the R1 zone.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Probably not many people in R1 raise pigs.
But-
Right.
But I know if this is considered to be, if the call is made and this is production of farm animals, it's not allowed in R1.
And there's no definition in the land use ordinance what defines
It
production of farm
hinges on the
animals?
word production of animals. And if the purpose is to,
Is to sell
have
meat.
a family pig,
Yeah.
it could be construed to be a pet. But if you have 3 pigs and they're going off to slaughter at some point, and it could be different. And it's not our call either, as a planning board.
Yeah.
But it certainly is something that you can look into through the town office and the code enforcement office also.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we've had 2 public comments. Is there a third?
It's a
We're getting
record.
better all the time, right. No more, we'll go by the public comment period. We've had our minutes approved. The next item is a public hearing, and it's for a major subdivision at 115 Old Pine Hill Road, Lot U7-47, and it's LRB Leasing, and I think it's Mr. Bodwell or Civil Consultants that will take over for a few minutes here.
Thank you. So, I brought one easel and one set
Yeah.
of plans.
And this is a public hearing.
To the
right,
audience, I think. It's probably
So we'll
appropriate.
call the public hearing has been opened at 10 minutes of 7.
There's another set on the table there if anybody wants to go and peruse them in detail. My name's Chris Mendy. I'm with Civil Consultants. I'm actually filling in for Jay Stevens, who's the engineer on this project, but he's away on vacation. And we're working on behalf of Les Bodwell, who you just heard speak a moment ago, and one of his companies. So we have a site located between, does this move with me? I think. We have a site located between Old Pine Hill Road and Pine Hill Road. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And delineated on the plan here in yellow, this is Old Pine Hill Road. This is, I'm sorry, this is, yeah, Old Pine Hill Road and Pine Hill Road. The property is identified as map R37, lot 6. It's 115 Old Pine Hill Road. The present use is a horse farm. It's been a horse farm for some time. There's a farmhouse and some outbuildings on the property. We're making application for conditional use and subdivision for multifamily housing. It's a subdivision because these units it's not being divided into lots, but there are multiple living units, so under state law that constitutes a subdivision. There'll be 2 buildings constructed with 8 units in each building, 2-bedroom units. There's parking for those buildings. And walkways around the buildings and patios. I'll show you some more drawings in a moment. The property presently is primarily fields. It's 5.037 acres, and this is an allowed use in the zone. And I'll try to be brief here and answer questions more than make a long presentation here. This is a boundary survey of the property showing the topography. There's a wetland area in this area on the property. The farm buildings and houses are in this area. The rest of it, as I said, are primarily open fields. And this just shows existing conditions with elevations and boundary lines. Second plan shows same information with the 2 proposed buildings. Again, 8 units per building, 2 buildings, 2 bedrooms per unit. Small patios on the back side of each building and parking area at the front of the building. There's a one-way kind of circular drive traffic pattern here with traffic coming off Old Pine Hill Road into the parking and exiting here and turning in either direction as they exit. Other than that, no real changes on the site other than some grading in the areas of the buildings and driveways. Some of the existing trees will be kept, and they're shown on some of the other plans, and then there'll be additional plantings along property lines and also to cut down on glare from cars moving around the parking lot and so forth, so that headlights won't be going across the street and so forth. Next plan is an enlargement of the last. Again, showing the 2 buildings, showing the patios in the back, showing the traffic flow here and the parking in this area. This is the front of the building, Old Pine Hill Road. There's an existing stone wall here, that kind of a retaining wall with trees up behind it. Though in this area, those will be maintained, and then there'll be some regrading in this area and grading. And the limit, so this is the jog in the property line that was shown on the other plan. The limit of the development on the site will be, more or less within the proximity of Old Pine Hill Road. This feature back here is a system for handling stormwater so that there won't be any increased runoff from the site to downstream. It'll remain as it presently is, going into the wetlands and then moving down. So it's kind of a detention area, filter bed, and also that will serve to process any runoff from the parking and roofs and so forth, and handle that all on site. And actually should be an improvement from what's happening presently with the manure piles and so forth and water moving off the site. Also, there's public water and public sewer on the site, and we'll be connecting to, in the road, and we'll be connecting to those.
Chris, while you're doing that, just for scale purposes, how far back is the front corners of the building from
Oh.
Old Pine Hill Road?
Okay, sure. 20 feet. Let's see, 25 foot. This is the sideline of the road right here, the heavy dark line. This is a 25-foot setback line. So the building corners back here, that's 50 feet, 75, somewhere 75 to 100 feet back from the road to the nearest corner of the two nearest front corners of the building, and then the rest of it will be further back. So this will be back actually further than the present buildings are. The next few sheets are just sewer details and utility connections and construction details that probably are not of much interest to anybody. So I'll skip through those quickly. There's lighting on the site also, the parking. And those are shielded lighting, so they don't produce any glare to the neighbors or control the glare to the neighbors. And also they're kind of dark sky lighting, so we don't have lighting up the night sky like in an urban area. This page also is probably, other than those who like fine detail, are about runoff and handling of the various construction sequences and so forth. I'm not going to go to any detail with that, but it is available if people want to read through. And the last two plans are landscaping details. So again, Pine Hill Road here at this area, the buildings in gray here, the parking in front. There are 5 new trees to be planted in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front in the area of kind of shielding the road. There's an existing tree here to be maintained, 4 existing trees here to be maintained, some new trees to be planted here, and then new trees back in this area near the property line. There's existing growth in this area and existing growth along the north property line, and then this is open field to the neighbor's property and some new plantings in that area too that will hopefully help shield a little bit and be a pleasant backdrop. That's it for my brief introduction. I'm happy to answer questions.
Lee J., do you want to fill in anything that you see that should be said at this point?
No, Chris did a fine job just bringing folks up to speed as to what the design looks like, and I'll jump in if I need to during the public.
All right.
Are there elevations of the actual buildings there for them to see?
You mean architectural
Yeah,
drawings?
yep.
I don't have any architectural drawings.
Similar to what's on Cemetery Road, though, is that right? So if you've seen the apartments over on off Cemetery Road, there's some new apartments there, and there's also some back across the street from Hannaford in North Berwick. It's kind of there's some way in the back there, and it's a similar design to that, just so people know. Kind of look like townhouses. They look very much like the condos 2 doors down, if not nicer looking on the outside than the condos.
Anyone else on the board have comments or questions of the engineer? How about, we're going to cover the audience now, and we ask that if you have questions, you identify yourself. So we have that in our minutes, and we'll see if we can answer them.
Come up to the microphone.
Yeah, please go to the microphone also.
My name's Tanuvial, and I kind of am catty corner to the property. And one thing that I'm kind of wondering about it is, I mean, it's 16 more units, and they're all 2 bedrooms, or that could be like up to 32 more cars,
Mm-hmm.
all coming onto Old Pine Hill Road, which is
If
already
everyone
pretty.
has 2 cars, that would be 32 cars.
Which is an awful lot of increase in traffic on that road. It's already a road that's used as a cut through where people are speeding. Would there be any consideration of slowing down the road and maybe putting in some speed bumps or something as that becomes?
You know, that's something that, you know, we may get to, because Old Pine Hill Road is really not, you know, the widest and the smoothest
It's
of
narrow,
roads.
it has deep ditches, and there's a lot of children, there's a lot of joggers.
Narrow's good though, for speed wise.
Yeah,
Not
so,
if you're on a bicycle, it's not.
I just 2 nights ago, a couple young kids were bicycling. One was on a bicycle, one on a little scooter, and he wiped out right in the ditch of actually this property. And he was in the road for a bit. I pulled him off the road and told him to come into the driveway. But the idea of 32 more cars and what's bound to happen between the people who use it as a shortcut to go from Pine Hill to Route 9.
Mm-hmm.
And also just wondering why all of it's on the Old Pine Hill side and not on the
well,
Pine Hill
I
end.
can answer that. So there's enough acres there to fit 16 apartments with the acreage, and Mr. Bodwell chose to put them all in one place. He's used up all the density he's allowed, which is 10,000 square feet per unit, and he chose to put them in 2 buildings. I think his first plan, he had 1 building, a larger building. Or 3 buildings, that's right. Yeah, there was a difference of 1 then. Yeah, and then he changed the plan to the 2, but it's still 16 units using up the density. And there's a wetland between his frontage on Old Pine Hill Road and Pine Hill Road, and he's staying out of that wetland, although he does have frontage on Pine Hill Road itself.
Yeah.
Right, and there's a driveway at that end too. There's a road on
There
the
is,
Pine
but
Hill
the
end.
wetlands and the setbacks for the wetlands don't permit building
Okay.
over there. So there will not be any building on that side at all.
Okay, and there won't be a road going through to
No,
access.
you
Okay.
can't do that.
Because currently there is that old driveway there.
Yeah, just a short little one.
Yeah, I think if you come in the Pine Hill Road side, you go in there maybe 150 feet, and then it gets wet.
Yeah.
Right, I know there's a spring in there, yeah.
Yeah.
There's an active spring.
Yeah. So that's, there's no plans to do anything in that part of the lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's all going to happen on Old Pine Hill Road, which is the uphill part.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, definitely the traffic increase and concerns, and especially with the subdivision across the street that went in a couple years ago, that there was only 5 units, 5 single families.
You're talking across the street, just
Yeah,
up the
Morning
street a
Dove.
little bit.
Morning
Yeah, I
Dove.
think there was 1 on the road and
4 in
4
back.
in the back. Yeah. Yeah.
But the amount of 32 more cars is an awful lot more.
Yeah, there's been a lot of building on Old Pine Hill Road, and, one of the topics that came up was sidewalks. So you kids can ride their bikes on a sidewalk.
I don't think there's room for sidewalks.
Well, there isn't, not without some significant things taking place. And the applicant we have 3 waivers that were considered
Right.
at the last meeting, and they were all approved. One was for the not having sidewalks.
And then the other question, I guess on the electrical going in, I know that on the Morning Dove subdivision, originally it was supposed to be all underground wires, but then they, at last minute, went for above ground. Is this gonna be underground or above ground? It is underground.
What was, I missed the last one, what was going to be underground?
The electric.
Oh, the electric. All right, all right.
And they also actually said they were gonna put some trees up on the existing property to block my neighbor, and they never put those trees in.
you know, that's another project, and
Right.
that's not the
Yeah.
topic tonight, so thank you for that.
When I see this talking about trees, I'm like, well, will the trees really go in?
Well, actually, if they're on a plan, they're not in.
Right.
Something can be done to put them in.
Okay.
Any other people in the audience would like to ask questions or make comments?
My name's Keith Ferlin. I'm a direct abutter right next door. I see we're planning on putting some trees up there. My concern is, in the past, when Wingate condominiums went in, several of those units were rented. The renters didn't seem to have the investment in the property and the neighborhood. I actually had to call the cops more than once to have people removed from my property. And I'm gonna be looking right at the end of this building. And I'm really concerned about the same thing happening. You know, whereas people own the units, they have some investment in the neighborhood. And I'm really concerned about that, and I would really like to see something a lot more than some trees.
Well, landscape is one of the items that we will be considering as we go along. We're at the preliminary stage right now,
I get that.
and
But I mean, from what I've seen, I'm gonna be the one that's most directly affected by this. And have what I've had to deal with in the past, and getting the police department involved, just to keep my property mine. You know, I don't really wanna
you
face that
had
again.
trespassers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't seem to respect the boundaries whatsoever. I mean, I literally came home one day and there was like 16 to 20 people in my backyard, you know, having a little get-together or whatever they were doing. I literally had to call the police to get them to leave. I haven't had that issue since. All those units, as best of my knowledge, are all actually sold and owner occupied. But that's a huge concern for me with, you know, that amount of apartments in there, and nobody has a stake in it.
Yeah, we can note that, and then that's something we'll cover as the
I think
project
that's a
moves
fair,
forward.
that's a fair concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other public comments or questions on the project?
My name is Mary Ann Ott, and I live in Wingate condominiums. And I just was wondering, what are the dimensions of this building? Because I don't see them on here.
So I believe they're 34 feet deep and 128 feet long. The units are 16 feet each, so 16 times 8, 80, 48, and 128 feet.
Can I ask that, you know, if there's a discussion, that we do it at the microphones for the people have an idea what's going on? Yeah.
I do have one other question. What are the snow removal plans? Because that's a lot of area for snow.
Yeah, I think Mr. Bodwell can probably answer that. He's got a couple other buildings of similar nature.
Sure, so we don't remove snow off of the site. In this case, most of the snow will be pushed here to the filter bed. One of the things Chris didn't mention is that this is actually a DEP filter bed. So all the rainwater runoff that comes off these parking lots, you see this, this black line here, these are sewer drains. So the water from the parking lot goes into these manholes and out here and feeds into this filter bed. It goes through 3 feet of material that acts as a filter and puts it out into the wetlands. They tell me that you can actually drink the water that comes out of this pipe. I haven't actually tried it yet, but
So is there a access road or something to push the snow to that drainage?
no, just right here, we'll just push it off the parking lot.
And there's gonna be enough room, like if we have snow like we did it like 3 years ago when we had, you know, snow up to our roof almost?
Well, I guess that's, you know, I can't really answer to this. how
Because
much
we
snow
will
we
have
get.
winters where we're gonna have that kind of snow.
Sure,
Snow-
and if we
it's
need
not
to
be
have snow
every winter.
removed, if we have to have snow removed from the property, we certainly will do that. If You know, what I would suggest to anybody that has any concerns about this property and about the way we take care of our property, please go tour our other properties. We have a property on 28 Old Pine Hill Road South. We have a property on 62 Summersworth Road in North Berwick with 2 buildings there. And we have a project we're completing on Cemetery Road. If you go to 117 Cemetery Road, you'll see a new road called Megan's Way, and there's 2 buildings there. And I think if you guys take a look at the property, the way we maintain our property and how we take care of things, and, you know, people talked about being concerned about unruly tenants. I can't speak to everybody that we rent to, for sure, but I can speak to how we manage our properties. And that's not something that we would tolerate. And if you look at our other properties, I think you'll be comforted to know that, you know, it's not, we're not just renting to anybody. We do a very good job vetting our tenants. Primarily because, you know what? I don't want calls from you telling me that my neighbors are bothering you. I get too many of those calls and they're going.
You get 'em.
I don't think that I will, because I don't think my tenants will bother you, but we vet them pretty well, so that's why, I'm not saying that you won't call if they bother you, but we haven't had any problems with any neighbors, with any of our tenants so far, knock on wood. But, you know, we do a really good job vetting our tenants. We're not just renting to anybody, so, and again, if you drive by any of our properties and you look at them, you'll see we maintain them impeccably. I mean, we really.
I get that, but as based on my experience so far, it hasn't worked out with renters.
I can understand that.
On the renting question, like what level of, like moderate income, high income, like what kind of rental units are these?
So these are higher end rental units. These are market rate rents. These units have all granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, very high-end finishes. The buildings have all high-end finishes on the outside. We try to use green building techniques on these. These are super insulated, all LED lighting. You know, we try to build environmentally responsible, and we try to attract the best tenants that we can. And so far, we've been very successful at our model. And again, anybody, if any of you want to go by Cemetery Road, we're wrapping up building the second building there. I have guys here all day. You want to take a walk through the units, take a look at them, and see, you know, they're pretty much going to be the identical buildings, except these are 8 units and those are 6 units. You can see the quality and the standards that we set, and you'll understand why when I say, you know, we typically get a better caliber tenant.
And the rents over there for a 2-bedroom are $14.50 a month, with
No utilities.
nothing included. Yeah, so it's not a subsidized rental. If that's a concern, it sounded like that may have been a concern, but they're. James can't live there, so and he seems like a nice guy.
So I guess in closing, for me, I just, you know, I invite you guys all to take a ride by any of my properties, and especially Cemetery Road. You can see we're just wrapping that up, so you're welcome to take a
Any of
walk
those
through.
properties fenced along borderlines?
So Cemetery Road, we also had an issue with screening for neighbors. So we had to put a pretty extensive screening in to block out the neighbors. This property, you know, you said you are the abutter on this side.
Yes.
You see we're putting in 6 red, 3 red maple, a red oak, and 2 sugar maples in here, and those will fill in very nicely.
Over 150 plus feet? Those aren't gonna fill in much.
And they're also deciduous, so in the winter, there's not gonna be any screening at all.
I'm not a landscape architect, sorry.
What size are they? 'Cause you can put in a tree like this big,
Right.
or,
I'd have to
You
look
don't
at the
know.
plan. You know, I had a landscape architect do this, and he said that he was coming up with the best screening that, you know, for what we're trying to accomplish.
Using native trees too. They do try to use native trees, like planting arborvitae or something like that is not a native use of the.
I will say also, although this is a public hearing, you know, for the public to come in and ask questions and see what the project's about, when you look at our agenda, when Mr. Bodwell comes in for the next time, the public is welcome to come in, and even though it's not a public hearing, there's still a time to, you know, to follow the project through, like for screening, for example. If you think that there should be something that you have a question on, you know, you can bring it up at a regular, they're public meetings. So this is not, this is the preliminary stage, although the plans are, they usually come in now like this plan, fairly complete. So, but watch the agenda, and if this is on the agenda and you have questions, come back in.
You know, another option that we've seen used for screening besides a couple of trees or a fence is using berms. If there's going to be excavation of material, building up a berm and then planting on that, and that seems to work really well for screening as well, so.
Yeah, that also abates a lot of noise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And it provides kind of a natural looking barrier that's not obtrusive. So just an idea.
There's another person that, would you like to come up, please, and identify yourself?
My name is Pat Levitt. I live at 130 Old Pine Hill Road North. Was there any type of traffic survey taken on the road?
I believe Civil Consultants did do a trips per day for the project.
I don't think that there was a deep.
We have it here.
I'm not the engineer on this, so I don't know the fine details that were covered. With most of these projects, there's what's there's a standard engineering manual that's used for analyzing traffic generation and looks at the numbers of houses or number of dwelling units or apartment units. If they're office space, it attributes, you know, various number of trips per day to all these different uses. And I believe that those tables and those calculations were analyzed to look at the impact on the neighborhood. As far as doing a car count or something like that, that has not been done.
Because usually most of the traffic is, especially in the morning and in the evening, people coming and going to work. One other question, is there going to be a stop sign as you come out of your development? Why I'm asking is, the development across from it, before they put the stop sign up, the cars were just zipping out. In fact, I almost got hit a couple of times. So is there a chance of getting a stop sign?
It's something we can bring up, and that's why we have a public hearing, so that some of these things come up, and if the planning board doesn't think about it, you know, the public often.
And when you're talking about putting trees and plants, I mean, so that it won't hinder being able to look out and see the road.
Yeah.
Because if they have to come far out, they're going to be on the road.
And I'm sure when they design the trees or the plants and a sign, all those things would be considered.
I can address that. So both the town and the state require minimum site distances based on speed, and typically they're measured with the driver's eye 10 feet back from the edge of pavement, and that analysis was done on the site, and grading and plantings and signs and so forth were taken into account. So,
What is the speed limit on Old Pine Hill Road? 35. 75?
It really should be lowered.
Yeah, well, speed limits, that's a town road. They can be set by the Board of Selectmen. They don't have to go.
that
it's not like-
board.
Huh?
Go talk to them.
So we can
But I
lower
don't
it
think
to 20.
it's going to be, if they're not obeying 35, they're probably not going to obey 25. And there's a police officer in the library parking lot 6 out of 7 days of the week. Yeah, constantly. So I mean,
That doesn't do any good?
it doesn't, I mean, I don't know, we've got a bunch of people complaining right here.
You know where he's gonna be, he's
Yeah.
gonna move around.
You gotta hide behind something.
Exactly.
But I mean, so if they're not obeying the speed limit at 35, they're not going to obey it at 25 either.
Well,
I invited Chief Town to park in my driveway.
Yeah.
element of surprise.
I would like to make one more comment, and that arborvitae is a native tree to the
Oh, okay.
northeastern part of the world, because you had stated that they're not native.
Well, yeah, I did. I actually wasn't aware that those were natural.
But they are native to like the whole northern eastern part of this continent.
Excellent. I
so.
don't think I've ever seen one in the wild, so thank you for the information.
Someone else in the audience have questions?
If you were seeing them in the wild, it's likely that your feet were wet.
Yeah, yeah. That's a pretty dry area right there on that side.
They grow in dry areas.
Oh, do they? Oh, okay. Then plant a bunch of arborvitae is, I guess, what we're getting at.
Danuvial is an expert.
I'm well aware of this. Plant a row of arborvitae.
Questions from the board? We're still an open public hearing. No one else in the audience? So at 7:20, public hearing is closed. And as I said, we're preliminary stage right now. We still have to go through the final stage, and the agenda will have, whenever, it'll be noticed on the agenda when this project comes back up next time.
Which is really the next, it's on the next.
Well, it's actually.
It's on the next line, so if you want to stick around.
Yeah. Public hearing is closed. The next item on the agenda is old business, and first item is LRB leasing for 115 Old Pine Hill Road, which we've all learned a little bit about right now.
I'm going to recuse myself.
Yep, and I
And
think Sean also was going to recuse. So we still have 4 members if we have to take any action of any type that we have a quorum. So you doing the honors, Chris? or-
I guess I am. Thank you for the time spent with the public hearing, and thank you, the public, for their comments, and hopefully we can address issues that people have, at least the ones that are within our control to address. So basically, nothing has changed since the presentation of the preliminary plan at the last meeting, other than, well, I think we submitted this with the last submittal. We received and incorporated recommendations from the Water District, and we submitted their letter of acceptance for the design that we had. During the past week or so, we also received comments from the Sewer District. There were a few minor changes. I can go through those with you on the plans if you want to see, but primarily they were replacing one clean out with another sewer manhole, adding a grade to a sewer line that we had omitted from the plan, and adding their standard notes to one of the sheets. And I have those if anybody wants me to read through them, but they're pretty much their standard notes about connecting to the sewer and coordinating activities with them and so forth. So we will make those. We have made the changes. We will resubmit those plans back to the Sewer District for their final comments and hopefully acceptance. Probably early next week, we'll send those back over to them. We have not, to my knowledge, received any word back from the fire chief, any comments on the preliminary plans. Mr. Bodwell, I
Yeah,
may
there's a
have.
June 19th letter from the Berwick Fire Department.
Okay, we didn't receive a copy of that for some reason.
Yeah, I didn't forward you one, I apologize.
Oh, okay,
Chief
okay.
got back.
We can read it?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll forward that to you.
that'd be great, thank you.
Well, just for public consumption, let me read it. It's really short.
Okay.
It's from the Berwick Fire Department to the Berwick Planning Board from Chief Plant. Double G apartment proposal dated June 19th. The fire department has reviewed the plans for the proposed Double G apartment complex at 115 Old Pine Hill Road dated May 24th, 2018. The buildings will have state-approved fire suppression systems, sprinkler systems, and the required Knox box rapid entry access system for each building, with the capability of holding at a minimum 8 apartment access keys per building. There were no other issues found during the review process. Please feel free to contact me should you have any questions. Dennis Plant, Fire Chief, Berwick Fire Department.
Okay.
So.
Sounds like no
Chief
hurdles
Plant
there,
didn't
maybe.
seem to have too many problems
Okay.
with it.
Good, so I don't really have anything else to present. I'm happy to answer more questions. As I say, the changes requested by the sewer district are very minor. I guess the board may want to have some discussions about public comments tonight, and I'm happy to address those questions if you want to address any of those.
Well, can you respond to the concerns about screening?
I can. My client will probably have to okay with me design changes along those lines, but certainly a fence is possible, and I think berm is also, as long as it doesn't affect drainage on the site, I think is probably possible. Other plantings is also possible, but.
So I certainly don't have any issues upping the screenage on the side. Either, I would prefer not to put a fence in. I would rather either do a berm or some evergreen type plants, arborvitaes maybe.
They're natural, they're native to the area.
We hear they're native to the area.
You know, I'm not a huge fan of evergreen trees personally, but you know, I like hardwood trees, oaks and maples. But certainly I can see the benefit of having, you know, maybe intertwining a few in here, so that you have kind of a mix of evergreens and whatever those are called.
Hardwoods.
What's that?
Hardwoods?
Yeah,
Deciduous?
what do they call those?
Deciduous, yeah.
There you go.
Leaves fall off, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty colors that
Certainly
fall.
don't have a problem adding some of those in. You know, a half a dozen evergreens entwined in there is not gonna make any issue to me. If that's gonna make you feel more comfortable, that you get a little more screening over there.
Well, yeah, I want it, so it's gonna basically be, difficult for somebody to just kinda meander around.
Les, would you consider a combination of, say, more plantings and a rail fence or something, you know, not a stockade type fence?
I mean, I consider it, I just don't like the idea of a fence in general, so I think, you know, more of a natural screening is more what I would prefer to see. You know, I don't have a problem putting a berm in, I mean, that wouldn't be that
Can
big of a
you,
deal to do.
over the next, I imagine you'll be in shortly again, is that something you can have on a plan that you can show us, and then it could be, it could be voiced? Anything else that we should be covering after the public hearing then? The traffic is gonna be, and I can sympathize with that, the traffic is really gonna be, become an enforcement thing. And if there is a safety issue on Old Pine Hill Road, then that has to be dealt with at a selectman's level and a police department level. And if it's 35 miles an hour right now and the cars are going much faster than that, then maybe that should be looked into. But,
If it's at all possible, how they have the speed humps over, what's the road down here?
Logan.
Yeah.
well, you can bring that up. My feelings are the selectmen would be pretty hesitant to put speed bumps on Old Pine Hill Road.
Everyone loves it as a shortcut, especially the ones that use it as a shortcut. That's right.
Well, there's a lot of speed bumps on that
Well,
road
I mean,
already.
you know, maybe that's,
But maybe one, I've always thought like one right near the library at Sullivan, because I mean, that's also a library, it's a public use area. You know, it's highly trafficked,
Yeah.
traffic because of
yeah,
that.
and I know when people are hurrying home from work, I mean, they're in a hurry to get home, you know?
Oh, I've had them tailgate me and pass me as I'm slowing down to go into my driveway, and it's a double yellow
Well, you
line.
need to go faster. I didn't mean that. Other than that, is that about it for LRB for Old Pine Hill Road for this meeting?
So, I guess we would ask to be on the agenda for final approval next meeting.
That's what I would think. I think if you have James put you on for an approval of the preliminary plan and maybe a few changes for the
screening.
screening.
Don't we have to vote on preliminary approval?
Hmm?
Do we have to vote on preliminary
I
approval?
think we do. We always have.
You guys
We
also
need
have
to
a
vote
dec-
first.
You guys also have a decision to make if you wanna meet on the fifth.
No,
Because
we
of your
don't.
bylaws.
No, we don't.
You just,
It's in the bylaws.
Right.
second
Come on now, you have to vote to meet on the fifth, so the next meeting would be the 19th.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I,
I mean,
Break our
that's,
bylaws.
it's
Somebody's gotta
tradition,
follow the
right?
law in America, for goodness
Yeah.
sakes.
So, Mr. Chairman, just from a process standpoint, what you could do tonight would be to approve the preliminary plan.
Yes.
With the conditions that the applicant come back with, a beefed up screening along the southerly, make sure we're in the right direction here. Southerly property line, to your satisfaction at that point. And I don't think there were any other additional issues, that would need conditions put on it for him to come back. And he's already said that they will do that to the plan, so, you know, you could approve preliminary plan without any additional.
I would request that in the final plan, you include your calculations on the traffic study that you did.
Okay.
Just so, I mean, I know we had the conclusions, but I'd just like to see the underlying numbers to see how you came up with them.
Okay.
That's all.
what you said, Chris, those come out of, they're a cookbook approach, right?
That's
Based
correct,
on
yeah.
units
Just
and
include
the
your
type,
assumptions.
number of
and-
bedrooms.
Right, yeah.
So we'll have them for the public record, and we can
Right.
show anybody
They're
where these
I mean,
numbers come from.
Yeah, typically they're tabulated for various times a day, various days of the week, weekend, and for all the various different uses, you know, townhouses, individual houses, apartments, dentist's offices, you know, there's hundreds of categories to choose from. So you look at the number of units, and then typically look at the highest number, you know, that's generated for those various times of day, times of week, holidays, what have you, and use those numbers in the
Chris,
calculations.
I'd, for the board, I'd focus on the, both the AM and the PM peak hour, weekday peak hour, because that's what people I think are most concerned about. If it were a business of sorts, maybe a weekend, but a weekday peak hour is probably the best. And so folks know, what happens with these calculations is that, a single-family home, for example, generates, according to these studies, 10 trips a day. An apartment townhouse generates less than that. It may be 7 trips a day. I'm just pulling numbers, but then what they're going to do is they look at a 24-hour period, and they look at what they call the peak hour. And the peak hour is the expected time of day that people are either going to or coming from work. And there's a peak hour period. I mean, I leave for my office, from my home, because I live almost 50 miles away. I leave at a different time than my next door neighbor may be leaving my driveway. I live in a condo complex, because he's only going a mile away. So there's this expanse of a peak hour and how many trips. So because you've got 16 units there, potentially 32 vehicles, doesn't mean that all of them are going to be lined up at the exit leaving at the same time. There's going to be maybe, believe me, the numbers will shock you. It may only say that there's 5 peak hour trips, because they have to calculate, you know, people leaving at different times of the day for various trips. But that's the information that Chris will gather, that they already have gathered, but will provide
Just
in
provide
another.
what you've already got.
Provide
That's all.
background calculations.
Can I just ask them, what do you do with that information though? So let's say it provides 100 extra cars a
Yep,
day.
yep.
So then what? So we just know that there's 100 cars? I mean, what are you gonna do with it?
No, for someone like me working with, when I look at that information, depends on where those 100 trips are going to, because they'll also do a distribution split. So 60% of those trips may go left and 40% of those trips may go right. And so then it becomes where in the system, the road network, is the units located, and you now tripping the warrant, a state warrant in many cases, to put a traffic signal or to put a stop sign. There are certain warrants or standards that you would look at to say that. Many cases, people think, we need a traffic light there. But when you look at the numbers, and that's the only thing that the engineers have to go on, you may not meet the warrant to put a traffic light there. So there's a lot that goes into this.
And who would take that information and put it against the warrant? Like, where in the system is that? That's your job?
That would be my job. And
Are
I
you
would
gonna do
recommend that based on that information, for example, in a particular situation, that the applicant would have to pay to put in a traffic signal, which is a lot of money. But you have to make sure that it would be warranted. There are certain thresholds as well that the traffic study would need to go to the Maine DOT, and the state DOT would make that determination if it's on a state system. So,
It's very interesting.
yeah, it's a lot that goes into it, yes.
Yeah, on that, when you're saying like the peak times and all, they take into consideration this local area and the kind of jobs people have here?
Nope, the only standard they have to go on is whatever this document, this Institute of Transportation Engineers, suggests that type of use has for a peak hour period.
Because I know, like, you know, I know from, I was gonna say, the Navy Yard from our,
Sure.
that
But
the
there-
heaviest traffic is
right.
at between 6 and 7 a.m. on our street.
Oh, it starts at like 4:30.
Yeah, it starts earlier,
Well,
but the
I was
real
on a
heavy traffic.
motorcycle around 4:45.
The only way that you get to that level is for a traffic engineer to put tubes out and do actual counts of those roads.
Tubes are the vinyl
Yeah.
with
And they
the
will
count,
do a
yeah.
24-hour count period, and then they'll look at how many trips there were and break it down hour by hour by hour by hour. It's fairly extensive work for them to do that, but in some cases, that's what they would need to do as a.
How about another alternative, like, if, I would think the Berwick Police Department would have Old Pine Hill statistics over the last couple of years.
They may
that-
have
with a
crash
question.
statistics. They may have crash statistics.
No, I have a feeling they may have more than that, you know.
They may not have traffic counts, though.
No, they won't have traffic
Traffic
count, but they would have, if it's been a problematic road, and it may be because, there is
Yeah.
a lot of traffic there.
Understood, but you can't attribute, here's where I'm getting I'll get a little defensive on behalf of an applicant. You can't attribute those past ills on a future development.
So I
That-
would
that's
request
That's true.
that when we receive the underlying calculations on the traffic study, that you or James submit them to the police department for their
Sure.
review,
Absolutely,
and then we'll know what they have to say on the subject.
Exactly.
absolutely.
And actually, I question how what it would be the process to get an actual count with a little blinky, whatever
tubes.
the little.
Planning board could condition an applicant to provide a full-blown traffic impact study prior to any approvals.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
It's a fairly extensive process and cost associated with it, but
Usually we use that for more in-town type,
yes. Right around this area, right around this area type of thing.
yeah. And we've had them, like when the bridge work was done 3 years ago. If you notice, those tubes were all over the neighborhoods here. And once in a while, you see them on country roads. I mean, I
Sure.
know I've seen them on, going up Little River Road a long time ago, and I've seen them on Hubbard Road.
Yep.
Yep.
There are times we do that through our rural contract with Maine DOT.
So how big a deal is it to do that? And you say it's
Um,
expensive.
If a full-blown traffic impact study was required on a project, you're looking at $15,000 to $25,000 or more.
That's putting the tube
Putting the
and then
tubes,
analyzing the results.
analyzing the results, putting it into a report. You not only look at that analysis, you need to look at crash information over the last 3 years. There's a lot that goes into it.
I say we go.
Lee J, I take it you've been doing this a long time?
I started out as a traffic planner 33 years ago.
It's a long time.
Yes,
So in your experience,
yes.
have you seen a big difference between the calculated studies that have already been done and these tubular counts? Do
The
you get-
tubular counts are gonna give you the existing traffic that's out there today. The study that they're doing is going to give us the number of trips that are being generated by this particular development.
And so they go hand in hand. You would take the information of what happens today and then take the information of the additional
With the
trips.
additional traffic.
Yes, they can do that.
But that's when that information be brought to the planning board, they would look at those two numbers to crunch together.
Yes, in many cases, a lot of the developments that happen on state aid roads, the state would have numbers available to us. This isn't a state aid road, I don't believe.
No, it isn't. I don't
So,
believe it is.
DOT probably does not have any numbers available to the traffic engineer. So they would need to put tubes out there.
Chris? Yeah.
Thinking in terms of, what potentially entails it.
One thing that could be done, Chris, so you wouldn't need tubes out there, is to get someone sit at the site during, a period between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. and just count.
Yeah,
How many cars are going north and how many
we've
cars
done
are
those,
going
I did those studies when I was in college,
too.
40-some years ago, and,
Yeah.
that's what the beginning engineers got for
1,
jobs.
2,
Yeah.
3.
Yeah,
Oh,
here's a
yes.
clicker,
Oh, yes.
Till your thumb goes numb.
Right.
So in this particular case, we're potentially, I don't know what the number of, trip ends are. It's a fairly small number of vehicles. I mean, it seems like a large number, but in fact, it's a fairly small number of vehicles. I'm not a traffic engineer, and I, don't presume anything, but just common sense tells me that going through all of the effort to do any kind of detailed study is probably not going to change anything with regard to how that road is administered.
No, again, I
or something that the applicant can do to change that.
No, a lot of it is enforcement. Enforcement that needs to happen today.
Just
And a higher level of enforcement, i.e. More tickets being given out and doing that sort of thing will change the traffic pattern. People will seek other routes.
Gotta stay ahead of them.
That's right, exactly.
Excuse me.
I mean, I think, let's take a look at the numbers.
Yeah.
My gut tells me you're not gonna see a high peak level of trips leaving the site based on the standard
what-
information.
According to your memo, the number is 11
During the peak hour.
during the peak hour.
So there you go. That's 11 cars leaving in an hour period, so that's,
Yeah.
what, 11 divided by 60 minutes.
Yeah, and compared to the traffic that's currently traveling during peak times there, it's probably, you probably have that much going right now, and you're probably gonna add that much.
Right.
I mean, it
That's-
is a cumulative thing, there's no question about that.
It's a
That's-
different kind of traffic. It's something turning out versus just going through. It's a completely different.
Well, it'll slow traffic down.
It'll be a slower, that's right, it'll be slower because you're gonna
If
pull.
people are slowing down and turning into the apartments, it's gonna slow down traffic behind them. They're
Right.
not gonna be going through.
No, they're gonna pass on the double yellow line.
Oh, well, I can't control how other people pass. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can control. You can't control how other people pass.
No, but that is.
I don't believe there's even a line down the middle of the road, is there?
Well, they could-
There's
There
a
is?
double yellow.
Yeah.
There is a double yellow.
Double yellow.
Yeah.
We figure most people coming are gonna be coming from School Street, going to there, so they're not going to pass on the double yellow line, because then they would be passing on the left-hand side and they would get crashed into.
No, the people in the apartment buildings won't. It's the people cutting through who do it.
No, but I'm saying that if somebody is slowing down for the apartment buildings, they're gonna be turning left, so somebody's not gonna pass them on the double yellow, they'd be passing them on the left-hand side.
No, you're traveling in the wrong
I
lane.
know what
Yeah.
you're saying, but
Yeah.
the experience of the vehicles there, I wonder.
Well, I don't know, I live there too, so I live right there
Right,
too, and I
right.
turn left right into my condos too, and I get it, I live
Right.
there too.
Right.
So we're gonna be looking at those numbers next time, and you'll be on the first agenda in July.
Okay.
And then we'll look at the screening,
Okay.
the traffic, and I think those are the major issues that we heard here.
Yep.
And so as, if I'm not that familiar with your process here, but I think Lee J. was suggesting that perhaps you have a vote on the preliminary, to accept the preliminary?
They
Is
could do that this evening, yes.
If it's subject to
Yeah.
those changes, that, we would love
Correct.
that if you're able to do that.
That doesn't guarantee final approval because we need to scrutinize all of that new information.
Pending the screening plan and.
I mean, I would leave that up to the board. Somebody wants to recommend that we do that? And
Yeah, I would recommend we do, 'cause I don't understand how somebody could submit a final plan until the preliminary one's been approved.
Correct.
No, you can't.
So if we agreed to schedule them for a final on the 19th, I think we gotta
Yeah.
Vote on it
vote
tonight.
on a preliminary tonight.
Yeah,
And that
typically,
doesn't mean
the,
you have to grant it on the 19th
Right.
if there's something that bothers you about it.
Understood, but we at
Yeah.
least need to vote on it and go from there.
Correct.
yeah, I think the preliminary, it kind of means the plan is complete, and we
And
thought
can go
out the
forward.
concepts, and we have rough numbers. And, you know, in recent times, in the beginning, preliminary plans were on scraps of paper, but now they come in pretty complete, so I'll leave it up to you guys. If somebody wants to make a motion, we'll,
Yeah, I'd like to move that we grant preliminary approval with an understanding that we will get on the final plan some detailed information on improvements on screening, that you will submit the underlying calculations that you used, and that you'll submit that to us in a sufficiently timely way that they can be forwarded to the police department so we can get their comments on your traffic calculations as well.
Okay.
yeah, if you can get that to them before, you
You've
should have
got
enough time.
essentially 4
yeah.
weeks, so if you can get it in a couple of weeks, that'll give the police department plenty of time to.
Okay.
I mean, you don't need to produce anything new, just send over what you've already done, and then we can get the police department to take a look at it.
Great.
Because they'll have the existing concerns, and then, you know, they can add on top of it, and I'm not sure that it'll affect you, but it is a matter of the town coming up with a better solution, it might be useful.
Yeah, so you've contacted the fire department, and in a case like this, it probably would make sense that the police department itself, if there's a problem on Old Pine Hill Road, traffic problem,
Do you want us to send it to them directly, or do you want it to come through the board?
Have it come through I would prefer to have it come through James. I guess.
Okay. Very good.
so we have a motion, we have a second to approve the preliminary plan for LRB leasing on Old Pine Hill Road. We'll do a roll call on that.
You gotta call the names.
I'm calling names?
First, you gotta read the
Well-
names, then you
Dave-
gotta call the names.
David Dow. Yes. Nell Shore.
Yes.
Paul Bover.
I would abstain.
Okay. And Michael LaRue.
Yes.
Okay.
Do I
So
need a
3-0
reason?
with one abstention.
Do I need a reason?
No.
If you'd like
I
to-
think we might know why.
like to give one, feel free.
Usually if you,
I had an issue with,
Yeah.
yeah, at the last meeting,
Yeah.
waiving sidewalks.
Worrying
Yep.
his old age, isn't he?
Uh,
Jose.
Yeah.
Yep, all right.
Keep-
Yep.
All right, so that takes care of the old business.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry, we have one more. We have just an approval of the findings of fact. And we can welcome Nicole and Sean back. And that would be for the findings of fact for the Clement subdivision on Old Sanford Road. I did read through those. I did not see anything that seemed out of whack. You draft these from scratch, or do you cut and?
The only thing I
That's
don't put in there is the actual standard statements themselves.
Huh,
Yeah.
you're prolific, right?
Let me tell you something, I'm doing that for like 5 or 6 towns right now, so.
Sounds riveting.
Yeah, the Clement project is a pretty small project on Old Back Sanford Road, and it's basically 3 lots
Correct.
one very large remaining lot and
Correct.
another lot's already built on, and this is the one that triggered the subdivision is the one we're considering here. We have approved the project, and the findings of fact have been issued, and we have to accept them.
Well, you don't have to, but.
Well, no, we don't have to.
We don't
but-
want to.
But I'm sure that somebody here on the board will want to make a motion on that one. And if people have read them, we will entertain a
Is it just,
motion to approve the findings of fact.
Just to approve the findings of fact.
I move we approve the findings of fact for the subdivision, who the applicant is Pauline Clement at 138 Cranberry Meadow Road.
Second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? No discussion. I would just say a show of hands on that because
Yep,
it's pretty,
that's fine.
make it easy for you. So all those in favor of accepting the findings of fact? That's unanimous. That's cleans up the old business. And the place is emptied out.
There you go.
I'm surprised.
Wow, that
I
was
wanted to wait till the last.
That was a
Yeah.
that was a
Well,
fun
I see ya.
fun couple of agenda items.
Take care.
Good night, Chris.
Paul, not to go backwards, I don't know if we want to wait for this for information items or not, but in regards to the discussion about traffic, I was sitting back there thinking about things. I used to live on Sullivan Street, so I know people come down Sullivan Street fast. What would the process be to turn the Sullivan Old Pine Hill intersection into a three-way stop? Sullivan Street is somewhat in the middle of that road, you know, you've got people flying down that road. Let's stop everybody at Sullivan Street, even if it's a paused stop, which
So you're saying as
rolling
your,
stop, which a lot of people take, it, you know, could have an effect of slowing traffic down on Old Pine Hill.
tell us exactly where the intersection you're
At the library.
considering.
Right at the library, yeah.
At the library.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes up, Sullivan Street comes right up to the library and Old Pine Hill.
Yeah.
Turn that into a three-way stop.
Well, that would become another enforcement issue, but it's probably not a bad idea because for most people will at least slow down for a stop sign.
Yeah. So I
Is
just
that
don't know
a
what the
selectman?
process
Yeah,
would
is that a
be.
selectman thing? Because it's a
Yeah,
those
yeah,
are town
That's,
roads.
That's a
that
town.
both
It
Sullivan
doesn't go
Street
through
and Old
us,
Pine
but-
Hill are town roads,
I
so.
assume we can make a recommendation.
We could recommend it. and
Couldn't hurt.
The police department could weigh in or
Yeah.
with the select
Yeah,
board.
so I think as a
Really
planning
an
board,
issue
we
on
can do
people's
that.
minds,
It
yeah.
might stop
We've
people
heard it
from
the
using
other
that as a cut through also. I mean,
Exactly,
there
might
are
slow
different,
down the
then
number
they'll
of
go through Wilson Street, which doesn't have residences on it.
What is the cut through? It's on Old Pine Hill Road and it's from Farwell's
School Street?
Mobile to Pine Hill. Is that the cut through?
Yeah.
Is that because they come in behind the post office, for example?
Some people, but even just turning, I mean, you're cutting across to Pine Hill Road through either Cranberry Meadow Road or Old Pine Hill Road
Yeah,
North.
yeah.
I think you're getting a
That's-
lot
that's
of
just one of
people
them.
coming from 236,
Yes.
Yes,
coming
yeah.
up all the way across.
What they
Old
do
Pine
is they
Hill.
go the back way behind the
Yeah.
post office. which-
And then up Old Pine Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all the way across to
Yeah,
Pine Hill.
and you know, I think crossing Route 9 there is an issue, 'cause I go
It
through there
is.
quite a bit.
It's an issue because people
And-
don't know what the traffic laws are, that if somebody is turning straight, they take precedence
Press,
over
yeah.
somebody turning, no matter who got there
Yes,
first.
and on my way here tonight, as I was coming down Route, what's that, I never get.
9.
Nine.
There was an accident.
There was an
I
accident
got
right
detoured
there, yeah.
onto Old Pine Hill. There was a car accident right
Yeah.
there.
It was
Right at the Route 9,
right at the
at
Route
Farwell's.
9, Old
Right-
Pine Hill
yeah,
Road
right-
intersection.
Right across from Farwell's.
Yeah.
and there is a stop sign there,
Yes.
both what, both.
Well, no, it was
it's a
on
two-
School
yeah,
Street.
it's a
It was on
two-way
School
street.
Yeah,
Street,
they
so
were
there
on
isn't,
School
there
Street.
wasn't a
The
stop
car was
there.
on School Street, so I don't know,
Yeah.
I couldn't see what had happened.
Let me do some work with my office. I don't know what the timing of funding is, but I won't promise anything right now. I can't, but I'll talk with Tom Reinauer is our traffic
Yeah.
planner, director of transportation. He could possibly seek some DOT funding for us to do some counts in and around that area. But we can't do it without the DOT funding. So let me find out from him if it's something that
That
we
would be
can
good.
That'd be
pursue.
great.
Yeah. Yeah,
Especially
and
when
maybe,
you are
it-
part of our CAX community.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
and, I mean, we do a lot of that down around the bridge, because it's
Yep.
pretty busy there.
Yep.
But I'm sure there's some intersections, like the Old Pine Hill Road, Route 9, by the library, and a few others that we should think about and, have a little list, maybe in decreasing.
Especially slowing down traffic coming into town as well. As the downtown develops, people fly down Route 9 going right into Berwick.
Oh, they do?
People fly on every road.
So
I'm
even
on Pine Hill
something
Road,
like
and there's
that-
people doing
Oh, yeah.
60, no problem.
I ride
on
my
that
bike
road.
down all those roads and it's scary.
Most of the roads
Yeah,
around town are
so-
the same.
I'll check
Prairie
it.
Meadow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Tell them
Cranberry
what, we
Meadow.
have severe traffic issues. in Berwick.
If it was a more walkable town, we might not have such problems.
How did you get here tonight?
It's a good segue while it's not a donut.
All right, we're down to land use ordinance amendments, and the first one is the design standards for the village
Yeah,
overlay.
so Lee J he's got like a packet template going.
Yep.
And then we'll probably introduce it, but we'll table it because we want to go home.
Well, it's about 20 pages. It is various issues from lighting to roof designs, everything we talked about at the last meeting. It's got photos associated with it to see what's good and what's not good. It's in draft form at this point. So I did get it to James for his look over, and I think we're on target. Folks may want to pick it apart, which is fine.
It's 20 pages.
It's about
and
20
it's
pages.
only the village overlay.
No, this is design standards, recommended or design guidelines. They're not going to be adopted as an ordinance. They're a
They're going to be by
guideline-
reference,
Correct.
but for the village overlay
Sure.
area. Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think we want to read 20 pages quietly here and then. So I'd say we take them home with us.
I'll email them to you
Well,
on
email,
Monday.
yeah.
On Monday.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or
They'll be there waiting when we get home.
Very tech savvy.
email, yeah.
So 20 pages coming.
Okay.
You want
Can't
to
wait to
that would
talk
be
about
good.
number
hand them to you
5.
quick.
Yeah,
Number
let's do
5. God, heaven, I still.
Are we going to say it? Because if we say it, we have to pay $10.
I have a hard time pronouncing it.
Spending an inordinate amount of time on number 5 lately.
Oh my God. Honestly.
So I,
Well,
Number 5.
it's something that's happening with the town,
Change the
so.
language on that.
Uh,
Consumed in number 5. You know, well, I guess it is legal now, so you could consume number 5 if you chose.
As long as you're not
But
selling
not
it.
during a planning board meeting, for goodness sakes.
Is that in our ordinance?
So I guess without trying to get into the weeds real quick, so what the amendment is, even that,
Nice.
that was no pun intended. Stop.
For someone to call for an adjournment. Luckily, this isn't one of those places.
I don't know if Lee J
everybody's getting it.
did this or if James worked on it, but it's an update to our medicinal.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
an update
good.
to the medicinal, but what it does is reference recreational and adult.
Just kind of references it. It
Yes.
doesn't.
Yep.
Well, effectively looking at kind of combining the two.
Correct. Correct.
But
Yeah.
what's missing, of course, is, there's some tweaks that you gotta put into this, because right now, all the different districts
Yes.
are equal and included.
Of course.
Yeah.
What,
So,
I guess I'm confused by that, what you mean by all equal and
Well,
included.
But you still have to have frontage on 49236 Sullivan.
Yes,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
But is that what we want? And,
Well, that's what we'll decide.
That's what you need to
as-
decide,
as we
but-
move along.
That's right. Exactly.
and then where did the licensing and fees come from? The reason why I asked that, the selectmen usually set those amounts.
I took those, again, as part of the effort to do this quick. I took it from another community that has already established their licensing fees. You can make them whatever you want, but that's certainly a fairly
Reasonable.
fee, and it's not inexpensive. It's a starting point.
Yep.
So when we read this and consider, the elements that are in there,
Whatever's underlined would be new and proposed.
new and proposed is the,
Yes.
right.
Yes, everything else is existing.
So we should annotate this and come back at a meeting and give it to you?
Could you send to us, unless we already have it somewhere, this reference to the main law and these 4 different tiers on the 3rd page?
I can get those
The
for you.
fees are based on tiers, and to have a license fee of $30,000 tells me that's gotta be one heck of a big tier.
Yeah,
Yes.
So I'd like to know how big it is, and
I
are
think
we
it says right there,
obligated to
doesn't
have
it?
such a tier in the town of Berwick? It sounds like that would be about half the size of the town.
Well, I think it says there what the size is, I believe, and,
How many,
didn't
you
say-
mean
I
square
don't-
feet? This is for cultivation facilities.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So,
It just, you have the tiers, but there's no
I-
Square-
designation
no square
of like
feet.
size
It
of
just-
a building
It just
or.
says, tier 1, this is what the fee is, tier
Yeah.
2, and I don't know how big the tiers
Right.
All right, I'll get that for you.
yeah, for example,
that for you.
especially the 20,000 square foot tier,
Yep.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, see, there you go. That's the size of the cultivation facility. That's why
Right.
the fee would be that large.
We already have one that's planned on Route 4.
Right.
We have one that was
But understand,
grandfathered, you know.
understand, you're saying it's planned. The retail adult recreational law is not going to take effect until next June, July, who knows when.
Yeah.
And until that happens, even if we put this ordinance in place, no one can apply to the state to get a license.
That's correct.
So that's why I kind of
It's just for talk's sake right
stumbled
now.
a little bit early on in this process and said, I don't know why we want to get it done in November, simply because we don't know what the state rulemaking is going to finally say,
Right.
and rulemaking isn't going to come out until at least next spring.
Well, I think part of the concern is the problem we heard this evening.
But
That-
that's for
that-
medicinal.
Yeah.
That's
No, but the
medicinal.
point is, if the state license comes in February or March,
It won't. Trust me, it won't.
okay,
It, more than likely, it's not.
Rulemaking is a long way off for that, because what rulemaking says basically is that the department that's gonna control, this, they have to create all of the regulations, and then it's gotta go back to the legislature for their approval. And we know how that goes. So rulemaking could take another year.
I have 2 questions on this. One, Sullivan Street.
Yeah, I had the same question.
that's for cross.
You're gonna have to ask
Okay,
James,
then we need to
because-
define
No,
boundaries.
there was a subsequent change that I didn't print out, and instead it says like it's allowed in CI
in the CI
period,
zone.
and then the Sullivan Street is out.
Okay.
So it's allowed in CI, because at one point it was frontage on 9, so technically like the downtown has frontage on 9 and
right.
whatever.
Yeah, we were tweaking it as early as this afternoon.
Yeah, no, I get it. I just wanted to
Yeah.
point
So
it
yeah,
out.
the Sullivan
So
part,
the net result is, it is or is not allowed across the street.
yeah, I mean, as it's put it is allowed.
I thought we were.
In the final version is, or-
In that amendment, it would be, that's the
I
starting
understand that,
point for
but you
discussion
said
points.
that there's a subsequent amendment you're working on?
That's, no. It says it's allowed in CI, period, yes.
Yes, it
Instead
would
of-
be, yes,
instead
it
of
would be
putting
allowed across the
the
street.
streets on there.
Yes, it
They
would be
just-
allowed across the street.
Okay, yes, it would
As
be allowed
long
across the street.
Yeah, because that whole line there, basically you've got every one of our zones listed.
With frontage on Route 4, 9, and 236. So the major highways.
In CI.
Well, he's got R1, R2, R3, RCI.
Yeah, and this is just a discussion point, right? So
Mhm.
the way that amendment is currently reads, it's allowed in CI and allowed in those districts on the major highways.
Which is basically anywhere in town.
No.
Well, no, only
Minus
on the
Only
major
on
highways.
On those highways, but anywhere within the town on those highways.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a starting point.
My other question is just a question. because we did have David Springer come in during the public comment section and session, and I had an inkling. I mean, nobody tells us when they're popping up medical marijuana facilities around town, and there are some, but I actually heard from somebody else because it smells over there. They are, I guess they're not using a good odor control system. I don't know. But because they didn't have to come through us, and when they built, we didn't have our standards in place. We really just did it. So they don't have those standards. Is there any way to backtrack and hold them to these standards? I mean, how do you do that? Because it's not.
Well, our town ordinance has a section called toxic and noxious discharges.
Yeah.
And apparently there are DEP or EPA standards, and if you violate them.
And there is a possibility
I'm
that.
assuming when we get a CEO, that person should go out
And
and find out.
there is a possibility come November, if it's amended to be allowed on R3 on the major highways,
Yeah.
he could be coming for conditional use.
Okay, because I mean, I ride my bike by there and I can smell it, and it was just, it was shocking to me that was like that.
Well, I mean, that's one issue. The other issue that I think is we really dropped the ball on, you have 4, I don't know how big the buildings are.
They're big.
Right.
4 big buildings, and for normal uses, for anything else but medicinal marijuana,
Yeah.
you need a conditional use to build those buildings.
Well, it's
For those,
No,
That was
not to build
post,
them.
that was post permit issuance.
yes.
That was, the original ones were issued under the agricultural use prior to the town having any standards or regulations
Right.
regarding.
So if someone builds 4 large, I don't know how many square feet they are, and they're gonna grow carrots,
Mhm.
does that need a conditional use?
That
4
would
large
be
footprint
agriculture,
buildings?
though, wouldn't it?
Not if it's an agricultural
Because
use.
that's an agriculture,
Right.
but
you
now
have
it's not
since-
agriculture use.
Right, before
We
you
changed the
created
use.
medical marijuana definitions and use categories, it was categorized by the code officer here as an agricultural use. So it did not need any review or approval.
I don't know what these
Which is why
buildings
4
look
big
like.
buildings went up
What
on
I,
School
what I
Street.
picture is a light industrial. That's what I picture.
You
Yeah,
probably
so
should,
do I. I picture
probably
it.
should, I don't know if you put a provision for building size that it triggers a conditional use.
I have used that in other communities, where, for example, in a general business type of zone, if the use is permitted, that's great, but if the building is over 5,000 square feet, then it needs to go to the
Site,
planning board.
that's a site review.
Correct.
Yeah.
If in the industrial zone, a use could be permitted, but if they go to a size of over 10,000 square feet, then it needs to come to the planning board.
It just seems to me that, I don't know how many thousand square feet these
Right.
buildings are, but it
Right.
just seems to be a big hole there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think that train left the station early because it was prior to having any laws in place or regulation in place.
I think
Time.
what we will want to look at is, we like the idea of separating the 4 license classes out for 4 separate uses. So when it comes to processing, making the brownies or oils or whatever, testing, cultivating, and retail, break those 4 out, and then look at the locations in there.
For recreational.
Right.
Or are we going back and
think for all of it.
redefining it
For all of it.
for medical as well?
The end game is combining it, but like you said, we have a lot of time.
We have time.
Yeah.
I
But,
mean,
I mean,
We don't have a definition of adult recreational marijuana establishments in this ordinance.
Well, we just defined retail marijuana. Remember
which adults,
what just passed?
that's adult.
So retail marijuana has been defined and put in the use table as prohibited.
But do we have a definition of adult recreational marijuana establishment?
I don't remember if we did that or
'Cause
not.
I think
It's
we have
referred to at least twice.
yeah, we have
in this-
recreational.
In this ordinance.
It's
Whatever-
not that
whatever you
verbiage, but we
have-
did define it. 'Cause we
Whatever-
defined it as social clubs and whatever.
Yeah, and
Social
I don't
clubs are
think
out.
those,
Social
Well,
clubs are gone.
marijuana social clubs.
They're gone.
Oh, all right, we
yeah,
did.
no, but you
Perfect.
still have retail.
Correct.
Yeah, the social clubs are no longer one of there were 5
Right.
things, now there's 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big things, as far as I can see, is figuring out if you want to allow a retail store down here and if you want to allow growing down here. Another thing is, I was talking with Eric today about if you have cultivating and selling in the same building, there's a provision in there where the cultivating can not be bigger than 20% of the building. So 20% of the L-shaped building is about 3,500 square feet, and 20% of the concrete building is 7,500 square feet. And that would be for cultivating.
Is that a lot? That doesn't seem like a lot of square footage compared to like the. Well, no, I'm thinking about the.
7,500 square feet
But
for
I'm thinking of-
cultivating marijuana?
Well, I'm thinking of the plans.
Make a lot of people very happy.
I'm thinking of the plans that we just had, the plans that we just had in front of us, and the different stages of cultivation, and
No,
the
you're
different
right.
stages that they have to be in. It's really not a ton. I mean, from what we learned from that one application, I feel like it actually isn't a ton of space.
Can I speak to that? Specifically about the site across the street, as I've been talking to Mark Cahaya about doing some projects over there together. We actually have two tenants who are interested in that exact thing, in those exact buildings we were talking about, and the smaller of the two wants a 10,000 square foot grow facility with a 1,000 square foot retail space. The other grower wants a 20,000 square foot facility with a 2,000 square foot grow space. And neither of those two numbers include any processing facility. Just to give a little perspective on what some of these growers.
So where are they processing
was
it?
gonna
They're
say, so
growing
they're gonna
it,
ship
and
it
then
out
what
to
do they
process
do?
it?
Yeah.
What's that?
They would ship it out to process it?
Well, if they didn't have a processing facility right
Yeah.
there, yeah.
And then they bring it back in to sell it because there's a retail component to it also.
Yeah.
This is retail,
When you get into
and it's
tricky things,
recreational.
a lot
It's
of it
not
has
medicinal.
to be in-house.
What they're
If
talking
seed
about,
to
right?
sale,
It makes sense.
the
to me.
processing would have to
Currently,
be
my
in it for
understanding
that
is
big.
that a caregiver can have a retail location.
Yes,
Can sell to people who have medical licenses.
that's correct.
So it used to be, and I don't have the law in front of me, so I can't say this is actual fact, but my understanding is that a caregiver can sell to almost virtually as many patients as they want because they can rotate the cards in and
Yeah.
out.
That's true.
So a caregiver actually under the law can have a retail location.
Well, the
Y-
people on
But
Route
that's
9 are,
different
I
because
mean,
it's
they're going
not
to be selling
retail
retail.
to
They
the
said
general
that.
public.
But it's not
Right.
to the general public. They're going to have
Right.
their patient come in.
Yeah, and that's
then-
Route 4.
Yeah,
Route 4 is the
yeah.
same thing.
Yes, yep.
And I said this before, James, I really think before, as a planning board, we figure out where this should be allowed and where it's not allowed, I really would like to have some kind of a public forum so we get the feel of what the townspeople are thinking. I know the state level referendum was 49-51 or something, and then when it came to a town vote here, we chose to put a moratorium on it, and it was the numbers were very different. It wasn't 49-51. So I'd like to have some kind of, I'm not sure how to do that, how to have a public forum to get a feeling for people. Where should we have this? Where shouldn't we have it?
Yeah, we can talk about it. We can do it in a multitudes of ways. If you want to do a planning board hosted thing on a planning board night, that's one thing. Or if you want to do
Can we call it a public hearing at one of our meetings?
Put a sign out in front
Public
of the
input,
town hall that says.
public
Yeah.
input.
Put
Wouldn't be a public
sign
hearing,
out in
it'd
front
be
of town
public
hall that says, we're thinking
informational.
about growing marijuana and selling it across the street. Come and
What are your
talk. Come and
opinions?
talk to us about it
Just-
tonight.
just put a date.
Won't be.
Right.
Yeah, you won't
No,
have any
but-
problem.
but
But
you've
it's
got it.
true.
I mean,
That's what
I'm
you have
saying.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take a picture of it. Take a
mean, we
picture of
may
it. Post
be-
it on Facebook.
Yeah, we'd
It'll
have,
be-
have to
be
host
very
an auditorium. But
surprised.
I'd be happy to.
You'd have to do it upstairs.
Help facilitate it and
I'm not coming.
help to host it.
I'll be
And Nicole is front and center.
You have to.
Yeah, no, I won't be here for it, but I'll watch it on TV.
We've done a half a
About
dozen
it
of
on
these
Facebook.
community forums. So if you think it's important enough, I can help
Yeah,
organize
but
it.
will you percolate that and actually pass it, by the town manager and whoever else would be involved in setting this up? But it should be a public forum of some type.
I would say definitely, if that's a discussion they're having for across the street, I can tell you that people that started the whole Envision Berwick, what was 5-6 years ago, I was at a lot of those early meetings. That is not what they envisioned. I can tell you that right now. And I'd say most of those people still live in town.
But you can still have them, but it doesn't have to be downtown.
Yes.
I mean, we have them now, we got them on Route 4, Route 9, I mean,
And I
they're,
understand it, but if people start talking about across the street, I can tell you that that's.
that's your,
a whole
that's your
nother
future
story.
downtown, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we may be very surprised on the public feeling
Mhm.
overall, and
You know, that was a good question that was brought to me, was it, you know, do I think that's the right place for that type of business? And it's the short answer of that is no. But, you know, looking at a couple of those buildings over there and the configuration of them and what can you do with them, you know, once you start developing these sites and putting storefronts in, you know, it's going to leave some massive space that I just don't know what else you could possibly do with. So, you know, the bigger issue is, I was talking to a dispensary owner in Las Vegas, and he said that, you know, they're having, and I know it's been a big issue here in Berwick, is the odor control. And, you know, there's just not a really good standard set forth for odor control, you know, that works, that, you know, you can say, here's the state regulations on, here's, you know, this is the type of system, you know, it's not like putting a sprinkler system in, right? You know, the state fire marshal approves it, you know, that's something maybe, I don't know how in-depth you guys can get with that, but maybe that's something that's worth looking into is.
well, we covered that. We covered that with a 19, almost 20,000 square foot when it's built out on Route 4. And we both, we all felt that having not only an air control with carbon filters, and it's supposed to be state-of-the-art. I know that means it's just all we know today is state-of-the-art. I mean, it could not be
And we
that
made
great
it
down the
we
road.
made it the applicant's problem.
Yeah,
To
and-
change
and
out
they-
the filters
they
and all
did come
that,
up
yeah.
with a filtration system, and we can actually ask to have it tweaked if it doesn't work.
Mhm.
We also have, we're learning that the sewage that comes off a grow facility
Yeah.
has to be
Treated.
treated also. So they're gonna keep that on site and then haul it off to a treatment facility.
Well, yeah, that's my question about, I mean, what about,
That'd be
what
hooked
about
up to
what's going on
sewer.
over on Route 9? They dug test pits for their septic, I
They're,
mean, like
they're
that
not
stuff-
on town sewer.
No, they're not. They talked about digging test pits for their septic. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is like that got all the way by us and we don't know how that's operating over
It
there.
was built before, I think anybody here ever knew about it.
Yeah.
The
So
buildings
in
were built.
summary, you know, across the street, the short answer I would say is no, not cultivation over there. But then, you know, when you look at these big massive buildings that are left behind from the tannery production, if in fact it can be contained, the smell, why not?
Yeah.
It's CI zone, it's
Yeah.
commercial industrial.
Mhm.
Every other town
Yeah.
that allows it in the CI zone. And I understand we're trying to build it downtown, and believe me, if everything works out with Mark and I, I'm gonna have a huge interest in how this town comes along. I already have a huge interest.
Well, the downtown, I mean, when Prime Tanning was there, we were very glad when they left because of the odors. That was one of the big issues. And people were probably, the ones that were here, 15 years ago, they're gonna be thinking about that.
Yeah. But if the odor is controlled and you can't tell what's there, it doesn't matter if you're manufacturing marijuana or software.
That's my point.
Yeah, well, and that's why we put all these darn regulations in place.
The issue- I think
Can
the
we
issue really
expect that
becomes,
the
you know,
state
can you put a
regulations will address that issue? of-
I don't know
of
what they're
odor
gonna,
control?
I have no clue what
Yeah.
what rulemaking is going to come up with for any
Well,
aspect
is it
of
in the state law? Is there any mention of odor control in the state law?
Nope,
Oh, there's gotta be
Nope.
something.
Not yet.
nope.
That seems like that would be.
That'll come through
Yeah.
rulemaking
Yeah.
if it comes through at all.
Yep. It'll be,
When
it'll be
will we
based for
get
the
an
town to
idea whether
town.
the state will,
It's-
sorry?
it's-
when will we have an idea whether the state will give us some guidance?
No idea.
Are they expecting this is gonna be on 100-acre parcels, and then who cares about what it smells like?
Well, I know up north
I
in
think
the
it's gonna be a
Holton-
case-by-case basis. They
So it's
want, they
gonna
wanna
be
put a
up
lot
to
of
us.
feelers out, and then the towns,
Yeah.
depending on how everything situates and settles, everything's gonna form. It's really relaxed right now because they wanna see what people are gonna do with it.
Didn't the
It's-
state put in a canopy limitation?
They initially
They-
had one in.
Yeah,
It was
they
taken
took it out. It's hard to regulate that.
Yeah,
Well, we have time, like you said.
you do. I mean, it's hard to create an ordinance around something that you don't know what it's gonna be.
Right.
yet. And I mean, again, even if we had it and even if people wanted to come here, they're not gonna get a state license until rulemaking is done and everybody's happy and everything's in place, so. You could approve whatever you want here today, but nothing's gonna happen until the state.
Right. But in the meantime, you would like, you know, us to look at this
Understood,
and
yeah.
comment on it.
Yes.
And whatever we can do now, it's just good
Be
training for
prepared.
what's gonna come down
Yep.
later, yeah.
Yep.
It seems to me that a lot of the ordinances, from a land use ordinance, should be similar. I mean, you know, I think with the land use ordinance, right, you're dealing with where a production facility can be, where a retail facility can be. I don't see how that's gonna change.
And they're really very different too. I mean, the grow facility should be very different than an outlet, you know,
Yes.
a public outlet. I mean, they're totally different animals. You know, one's a little storefront or a big storefront. I mean,
That
you
has
go to
no smell.
Colorado and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I
Yeah.
don't see where, you know, no matter what rules come down from the state, how that affects where you allow these types of businesses.
It doesn't. That's your land use
Yeah,
ordinance.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, but one concern is if we're comfortable that there is an effective odor control system, then you're right, it really doesn't much matter. If we're not, then, you know, making a mistake on a facility that's on Route 4 is a whole lot different than making a mistake there's a facility across the street.
Yeah.
And then the
And
question
at
becomes,
this stage of the
how do you
game,
enforce it?
I'm personally not comfortable that at least as a planning board, we really have a well-defined odor control system. I mean, the words are lovely, but I gotta figure somebody who's doing a production facility has got a whole team out there walking through the loopholes that we inadvertently created. So until there's some comfort level that we can indeed make sure that the odors are controlled, I think we need to be extremely careful about where we allow these things. Now, if we find out that there is, you know, a design system that works, wonderful. I've got no problem. I'm not comfortable that we know of such a thing right now. It may exist. We clearly don't know what it's called. I've never heard the name of it, whatever it is.
Oh, and quite frankly, my friend in Las Vegas said, it's their biggest problem. You know,
Well-
containing the odor, and then, how do you, if somebody calls up and says, I have trouble with the odor, how do you go tell if there's trouble with the odor?
Oh, we've,
How
yeah,
do you
we've
gauge it?
discussed that,
Right.
yeah.
By
At
my
what certain
calculation, about
distance is
2
it?
hours
Yeah.
ago, about 2 hours ago, you stood up there and complained about pig odors. So,
I agree, and listen, I don't want, you know, I'm not saying I don't want cultivation facilities on the tannery site, cause I kinda do, but I want them to be contained.
and
I
I,
don't want the whole town.
And what we're saying is, we may not know the technology needed to contain it.
Yeah.
And we do have one on Route 4 that's gonna be a good test bed. We'll see how that works out. But, you know, to start downtown with a big facility here could be, to me, it could spell doom for everything else that'll come after us. Because you're gonna have probably half the population that don't wanna be next to it.
and frankly, just, you know, and this may just sort of be, you know, if after everything that everybody in this town has gone through for the last however many years,
5 years, yeah.
if the first things that show up over there are marijuana cultivation facilities, sure seems like a whole lot of us wasted a whole lot of time. You know, and again, you know, that's not a legal standard, it's not a policy standard, it's just one damn big disappointment. And, you know, from what I saw today at the Brownfield Advisory Committee, there is a wonderful story that I hope people will go to BCTV and watch when it goes up. Because there's way more that's gone on over there than even I was aware of, and, you know, I'm reasonably close to a lot of this information. So to have that wonderful story about what's been going on end up with a cultivation facility as the first thing in, you know, it may be appropriate to be, you know, when nothing else works, fine. But for it to be one of the first things in, you know, I just can't imagine a lot of people are gonna go, whoopee, boy, it was worth all that time and effort. But, you know, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, better to start slow and where it has the least effect and find out how
If
it
it was
works.
cultivating tomatoes, like those Bob's indoor grown tomatoes or whatever they are, homegrown tomatoes, backyard tomatoes, which are grown in Maine somewhere,
Yes,
would
they
that
are.
be different? If neither of them are emitting a smell and they want to grow tomatoes in downtown Berwick, would that be different?
If neither of those have a smell, I don't think it would make any difference.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is what's behind the walls, nobody's going to know what's
Right.
behind the walls. Nobody knows what, nobody on this board knew what was behind the walls on those buildings on School Street.
No, but
We
what
knew
what
about
was
it, but we didn't know about it until it was too late.
Oh. I only knew about it when I smelled it.
I just found out about it now.
Probably
Yeah.
at least a year or more ago, we heard about it.
Yeah.
But by the time we heard about it, it was like, oh, it's coming in.
Right,
And there was
right.
nothing we could do about it. But
Yeah.
we did hear about it. already.
a lot of this is a matter of scale and like growing tomatoes. I mean, we grow tomatoes and you know
Well, I'm just-
I don't
Well,
I
there's
can't smell the
in
plant.
Madison,
Plants,
there's
plants,
that
plants.
tomato plant, like that greenhouse, and that place is huge, huge facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if they're
That's
if
just
they're
tomatoes.
making,
I don't know.
if they're making
I gotta
Got 30
believe
foot
more
tall
people
plants in
Berwick
there.
use tomatoes than use marijuana, but I could,
Well-
but I could be dead wrong.
That's
I will
why-
admit it,
I hope
could be
so.
A public forum.
Oh God.
All right, is that enough for marijuana?
That's
for
enough of
tonight?
marijuana for me
Don't
tonight.
say the word again. All right.
Last thing, envision the downtown, the first 3 stores that go in, Krispy Kreme, a pot dispensary,
Starbucks.
Domino's Pizza. Talk about mass confusion.
Which one is your first stop?
True.
All right,
And this is after the brewery opens.
Yeah.
so that takes care of the ordinance amendments
will be
that
the-
we're
the
we're dealing with. All right, there's a bunch of other things here. James, catch. You want to tell us what these are, James?
Thanks.
Yeah, so, as you might be able to see, if I get a nice zoom close, so those are
Blow that up.
the bricks from the prime chimney stack that was taken down several months back. We're gonna be working on, they'll be available to purchase, to be engraved and incorporated into a memorial, theoretically on the prime green space. We have to wait on permitting to fill there's a hole in the ground on the green space right now. We're gonna fill that in, and that's where we are looking at the project going. Once we can confirm that the project can go there, bricks will be available. Prices are still to be determined, but we are looking to self-fund a patio and brick seating wall capped by
Should
brick.
make a like a big smokestack.
I thought we weren't going to talk about marijuana.
You said the word, Niles.
Off the whole time. So yeah, that's that. There'll be more information soon.
Nice.
Great.
Probably a whole bunch
Look
of
good.
stuff on the Berwick, Town of Berwick website.
Yeah, berwickmaine.org, both Facebook pages, Town of Berwick Facebook page and Envision Berwick Facebook page.
So these bricks were all cleaned, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All
They're,
gears.
they're acid cleaned, acid wash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The hole you're talking about over there, is that where the drain is?
And it's not a viable, like, it's not really doing anything now,
Yeah,
based off where the elevations are at, so.
they would close that up.
so do we know what kind of memorial we're going to be thinking about?
Well, it's basically a memorial to people that worked at Prime, and it's also a memorial for the people that have helped build the community, past and present.
How many bricks do we have?
Well over 1,000.
Yeah.
Too many.
Are they gonna lay it out in the shape of the stack?
No, so the bricks will be about 3 feet high. The idea is to make it a seating wall,
Oh, seating wall, nice.
rather than have it be a walkway or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best idea I've heard. Possibly put the color mill in the middle, make it a flower bed, or it can go off to the side or something.
We do have 3 big color mills, and I think we have 5 small ones that may be even better. I mean, they're really works of art that were built here.
I think we'll incorporate the mills some way into the greenway, to like the trail system. They could be a landmark for the different areas or something. I don't know how weatherproof they are, or
They have a small one.
to be
with a
determined.
Berwick sign, right, at the entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah, the small ones that are still in the building, I think they're only about 5 feet or 6 feet in diameter. You can probably have fun rolling them around.
Yeah, we can turn them into like a little playground.
One last thing.
Kids inside,
I-
rolling around.
Get in there.
One last thing, I put, there's very beginning stages of the sidewalk plan, very early drafts.
Yeah, that's
Um,
this,
Yeah, so if you have comments or whatever, email me.
which we'd had that stuff.
The
Who wants
major
that?
thing is the funding mechanism for the sidewalks, which it sounds like what we would do, because we already have impact fees for open space and recreation, is keep recreation, but maybe take away the open space part and insert sidewalks as the impact fee. And then we have to figure out the exact mechanism for how much we collect for the impact fee. Does that sound right, Lee J?
Yes.
Yep, let's go home. Thank you.
I've got a few, I imagine we're in the information items
Sure.
as we speak here. So, the Great Falls Park, which is the PSNH piece the town of Berwick owns, going down the river from the bridge, there is some movement on that, and we have hired a gentleman called Cornelius Murphy, and he's come up with plans, and we have some that are hanging up in the town hall, and they're pretty interesting on what we think our little Great Falls Park will be like. On July 14th, there is a workday for both Prime Tanning. We have a little town forest growing in their parking lot. We're going to work on that, and then we're also going to spend some time at the Great Falls Park to clean, just clean up more invasive vines and things of that nature, and also give people a chance to see what we have down on the river there and how impressive that is. On August 4th, Cornelius and the people that are working on the Great Falls Park, there's going to be a design open house. That's a Saturday, August 4th, 2018, from 9 a.m. to 10:30. And the plans will be laid out so you can see them. And we're planning on having that probably right near the site of the park, which is where Sawmill Hill meets Moulton Street. The park actually has several parts to it, and it will be probably the beginning of an extensive trail system that goes south as well as up through Prime Tanning. So it's be a great thing for the future of our town to have that. So that's Great Falls Park, and that takes care of that. What did I miss? Sidewalk, we got that, and we got the bricks.
It's time we hit the bricks.
Public comment for a couple?
No.
Only if you buy
Don't
them.
throw those
You gotta
bricks.
buy them before you can throw them.
But they haven't been decided on how much they are yet, so.
That's right.
No, and how were they etched? Was there a little man or a little woman with a chisel and a hammer?
Handcrafted hours.
That's amazing, yeah.
No.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
They're almost too perfect for that, I think.
Well, what's next on the agenda?
Don't ask me. I'm looking for,
Look, I don't know
usually it's
who's,
Sean or
whose turn
Mike.
is it?
Mike's up.
All right, I move for an adjournment.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. What are the hands for? Had a great time here. Thought we'd stay longer.
We were having,
Longer?
it was a good,